Greetings, ladies and gentlefish, and welcome to a review of a tank that it's probably about overdue time I brought you. This is the AMX 12t, French Tier 6 light tank. Now, I've had this thing sitting around in my garage for ages, and I finally got round to playing it vaguely regularly. In order to bring you this, and I've had someone ask about me putting up some more gameplay or some gameplay from this tank, so it really is long overdue time that I got off my backside and did it. So just a little bit of history for you, I guess. The AMX 12t is so called because it's made by the AMX company, but 12t means that it's a 12-ton machine, so it is a light tank. This was not a tank that ever really saw production. It was more that it was a precursor to the AMX 13 series of tanks, which, as you may guess, were a series of light tanks that weighed 13 tons. These were a series of tanks that were made during the Cold War mainly, and were in service with nations for many years, and they might actually still be in service with some nations. It was exported widely outside of France, especially to places like Israel and a couple of other Middle Eastern countries. People often forget that France is actually quite a large arms and weapons manufacturer, and so they tend to supply quite a lot of countries with guns, among other things. And so this was a machine that saw that was the precursor to the AMX 13, which saw a lot of widespread use. So what do you get in game? Well, this is a light tank, so bear that in mind with the stats. You get 600 HP, which is not too shabby for a tier 6 light tank. How does it compare with some of the others? Well, you get 590 on the T21, and you get 570 on the MT25, so it's not too bad in the hit points regime, but it's pretty much par for the course. Now, it's a 12-ton tank, 12.17 with this configuration, and a 250 horsepower engine, which actually means its specific power is 20.54, which isn't too bad. It's not spectacular for a light tank, but it's not too bad. Although I should say, the ground resistance on this thing is utterly atrocious, so in practice, when you're driving this tank around, it actually feels quite sluggish. Top speed of 60 kilometers an hour is not too shabby, but again, it feels kind of sluggish. You won't often be going at 60 kilometers an hour. Traverse speed of 38, which for a light tank is positively poor. The armor, who cares? It's a light tank. It doesn't have any armor. Assume it has no armor. I mean, these values might mean that if someone fires a HE shell at you, maybe it won't necessarily penetrate, but you can't rely on that. Gun, I will get onto in a bit. Turret traverse of 44 degrees per second is not too shabby, but this is where we start getting a hint that just because this is a light tank, that does not mean that it's a scout. View range, 380 meters, which the other tier 6 light tanks tend to come with 390. That may not sound like a big difference, but it hints at the kind of characteristics of this tank. Signal range, 750, which is pretty damn good. It's a tier 10 radio. But very few people ever get excited about the tier 10 radio. So, what we have is a light tank, but a sluggish light tank with a slightly dodgy view range. It's not sounding very much like a scout. Okay, so the armor's garbage, it's a light tank, go figure. The mobility's not actually that good. What about the gun? Right, okay, this is one of the, if not the first French tank that you get that comes with an auto-loading gun. Now, before I talk about the gun in a little bit of detail, I just want a quick note historically about auto-loading guns, because a lot of people seem to think that they are some invention by wargaming and that they never existed. Wrong. They did exist. People also seem to think that because they weren't really around in World War II, they shouldn't be in this game. Well, wrong on two counts. Firstly, they did exist in World War II. There were tank designs of World War II that incorporated auto-loading guns. They weren't, generally speaking, they weren't often, a good example of the British cruiser tanks actually, they weren't often implemented because there tended to be complications with them, but they were occasionally. A second reason that that's fallacious is that World of Tanks is not a World War II tank game. Go back to the Tier 1 machines, they're pre-war designs. It's a mid 20th century armoured vehicle combat game. That's what it is. So that basically goes from the interwar period, so sort of the 1920s, through to kind of early Cold War time. So with some exceptions, it typically runs out in the 50s, late 40s, early 50s. There's the odd exception, I'm thinking the Tier 10 Japanese tank in particular, just to try and make things fit, and the up-and-coming Chieftain tank for the British might fall fractionally outside of the time span that people typically associate this game with, but nonetheless. Anyway, auto-loading guns. If you have a tank that's driving around, let's just take the AMX for instance. The AMX here, you can see, carries 30 rounds of ammunition. Generally speaking, a tank will not have all 30 rounds of ammunition in a place where the loader can quickly and easily access them. Why? Because that takes up an awful lot of space. And the loader only has a limited amount of space to work with. So generally speaking, you will have ammunition divided into two groups. The main store of ammunition, and then the ready rounds, as they're called. And the ready rounds are a smaller amount of ammunition that is in a position that the loader can easily access. Maybe it'll be half a dozen rounds, maybe it'll be a dozen rounds, whatever. All the other ammunition will be stored in boxes somewhere else in the tank. So what this means in practice is that the loader can quickly and efficiently load rounds for the gun, provided it's one of the ready rounds, but if the tank were to burn through those ready rounds, then his loading time would be greatly increased because he'd have to get the rounds out of a box that are stored somewhere else in the tank, okay? So that's what you have in a standard tank. Now this is not represented in the game. In the game you just get a gun as a rate of fire. It will fire, you know, around, if you hold down the trigger, it would keep firing around every, I don't know, 10 seconds, say, until the gun was empty, until you had no ammunition left. It does not represent the distinction between ready rounds and the rest of the ammunition stockpile. However, this is where we get onto autoloaders. The idea of an auto-loading gun was that the ready rounds are fitted to the gun in a magazine cartridge, and you then just fire the gun through that magazine and you've gotten through your ready rounds. And if you wanted to get more ammunition, you just drove the tank away, got another magazine out, loaded it into the gun, drove back to the battlefield, and you had your ready rounds once again to use. So in that context, it makes a lot of sense. And you do away with the dedicated loader because you have an automatic loading mechanism, because you have this magazine of ammunition. How is it implemented in the game? Now, this is where it gets a little bit weird, because the game does not represent ready rounds in a regular tank, but it does have autoloaders in the game. And how autoloaders work in this game is basically they will fire off however many shells are in the magazine very quickly, and so they will potentially deal a lot of damage in one burst, and then they will spend a long time reloading that magazine, which represents, you know, your crew having to rummage around and find another magazine and load it into the gun. In reality, this is a process that required the crew members getting out of the tank, walking around to the turret, loading in another batch of ammunition from the outside, and then driving the tank off. Sorry, getting back in, obviously, and then driving the tank off. So they had to get out in order to do this. Now, clearly they don't do this in World of Tanks, but you know, they don't get out of the tank to repair a track either. So that's a level of realism that people should already have accepted to be gone. So, as I say, in-game, you fire off the magazine, you then run off and reload for quite a long time, then you come back, fire off your magazines, you get high burst damage, but the counterpoint is that it tends to give you lower DPM, lower damage per minute. So, let's talk about this gun at last. There are two guns on this tank, and you will have to either play them both or free XP one of them. So, this gun on the left-hand side is the stock gun. 75mm gun, 6 shells per magazine, 1.82 seconds to load a shell, so once you've fired off one shell it's just under 2 seconds to load the next one, etc, etc. It takes you 14 seconds to load the magazine, 108 penetration, 110 average damage. That penetration goes up to 148 with APCR ammo, and the HE ammo is, you know, it's your standard 75mm HE ammo. Dispersion at 100 meters of 0.42, so it's not very accurate, and the aim time of 2.5 for even for a medium tank, that's not great. And that's pretty bad. It's horrible for a light tank. So what you have is this derpy gun that doesn't have great penetration, but if you manage to penetrate all 6 shells, you will do an average of 660 damage. Not too shabby. What about the upgrade? Well, still a 75mm gun, still got 6 shells in the magazine. Takes slightly longer to fire off shells, so it's just over 2 seconds this time between shells within the magazine. 20 seconds to load the magazine in the first place. Your AP penetration bumps up to 144. Your APCR goes up to 202. Average damage is 135, and you've got your standard HE ammo, 75mm, but I'm not paying that very much attention for a reason that I'll get onto in a moment. Dispersion at 100 meters is significantly better than it was before, but this is still no sniper rifle, and the aim time is 2.5 seconds. So what you have is a gun that's, the top gun anyway, is a little bit derpy. You know, it's not the most accurate gun in the world. It aims slower than it reloads shells within the magazine. So if you are at anything other than point blank range, you're probably going to want to wait a little bit longer just to have fully aimed your gun before you pull the trigger. And it has an average magazine damage of 830, which is actually not too shabby and is a significant upgrade. I think I worked that out right. Yeah, is a significant upgrade over the stock gun. This gun is just better in every respect, and actually this is not a this is a pretty decent gun. Outside of a howitzer, it gets the highest alpha damage of any gun to be mounted on a tier 6 light tank, I believe. I believe it also, again, outside of before the introduction of the new American light tanks, at least, it had the highest AP penetration of any of the tier 6 light tanks, which is not too shabby, but you do pay for that a little bit with its kind of derpiness. Now, I should also mention some of the stats that you do not see in the garage. So I've already mentioned the ground resistance, making this tank actually rather more sluggish than you might expect from the numbers. Other stats that you don't see: gun depression and gun elevation on this tank are dreadful. I.e. that's how far up and down the gun can point, and this is a trend that is set to continue on this French tank line. The gun elevation and gun depression suck, especially if the turret's over the back, and the reason's very simple. This is an oscillating turret. Instead of the gun moving in a cutaway or in the turret itself, you get the whole turret section pivot up and down, and that means that this part at the back has to come down in order for this to go up, and this has to come down in order for that to go up. So you can see that your barrel is going to strike the tank quite early, and if you go the other way, the back of that turret is going to strike the tank, and over the back the gun depression and elevation are even worse. It's horrible. The firing on the move, the dispersion of the gun when you move the tank is dreadful, so that means that firing this gun on the move is really not recommended. Now, I'm just going to quickly talk about the grind up to this thing. So what tech line does this lie on? Well, this lies on the French medium/light line, the line that eventually culminates in the Batchat 25 ton at tier 10. So we have, okay, you got the Renault FT at tier 1, whatever, no one cares. The lower tiers on this line play completely differently to the upper tiers. Tier 2, Hotchkiss H35 tank. For its time, this was one of the most heavily armoured tanks in the game. In service. In the game, it is a very heavily armoured tier 2 light tank, light in name only. This trend continues to tier 3 when you get to the AMX 12t. Again, very heavily armoured, the gun is rather lackluster, and horribly outclassed when it's bottom tier. Tier 4, you get to the AMX 12t, or the duck tank as some people call it. Again, slow, heavily armoured, kind of underwhelming gun. Everything radically changes when you get to tier 5, and you get the incredibly, immensely good fun ELC AMX, which is just a joy to drive, and I should probably rebuy mine at some point. It was awesome. And then you get to the AMX 12t, and it's a bit of a departure again. You get slower, you finally get a fully rotating turret. Your gun doesn't look as good on paper, but you have that autoloader to make up for it. So it's still a pretty... I think this is actually a pretty decent machine. A couple of other things that are worth noting. Ammo loadout. The top gun, you get more rounds of ammunition with the stock gun. I think you get 36 with the stock gun, but with the top gun you get 30 rounds of ammo, which is not very much. And this means a couple of things. One, I do not load any high explosive ammo. The high explosive on this gun is not very good. And you have to load the ammunition in full clips. A clip is 6 rounds. Am I going to load 6 rounds of high explosive? No. Sod off. 2, you could probably actually do away with APCR. I've got a magazine of APCR on this tank. I had it just in case, but I think the only times I ever actually fired it was when I'd run out of armor-piercing ammo. And by having that different ammo type, because you can't mix ammo types in a magazine, it means that you might get to the situation where you have a full clip of APCR, 4 rounds of armor piercing left, and you have to reload your gun. So you'll reload to the APCR to get a full magazine, because it doesn't shave off reload time just because you're loading in fewer rounds. So I would actually probably recommend just taking armor piercing, or if you don't mind spending all of the money in the world ever, just taking APCR, I guess. But I wouldn't recommend that. It will be an incredibly expensive way to play this tank. So I would recommend just taking AP, 30 rounds of AP. I think this clip of APCR was at best unnecessary and at worst detrimental. Anyway, so crew skills and equipment. Well, equipment. I used the standard grinding equipment for this. What would I recommend you use? Well, if this thing could take a vertical stabilizer, I would say take it, but it can't, so don't. It's an auto-loading gun, and like most other auto-loading guns in the game, it means the tank can't fit a gun rammer. So I would recommend taking... where's it gone? Improved vents. It's the only way to improve your reload time. And it will improve your aim time, your engine, it will just all round improve your tank. That'd be my first pick. My second pick would be an enhanced gun laying drive to make that slightly dubious aim time a bit better. That would bring your aim time down to around about the same time as the reload time between shells, which would be nice. Third piece of equipment, you could take your pick. Toolbox, waste of time. Fill tanks with CO2, waste of time. Coated optics, you could, but I wouldn't personally bother. This is not an active scout. Binocular telescopes are an option, just to get some view range when you need it. Ammo rack, I haven't noticed any ammo rack problems. Enhanced torsion bars, it's an option just to increase the durability of your suspension. Camo net is an option, so you don't get spotted. Light spore liner, waste of time. So I would say your third equipment slot wants to be either... possibly coated optics, but I don't really recommend it. I would say either binocular telescopes, camouflage net, or enhanced torsion bars. That would be my recommendation. Plus improved vents and an enhanced gun laying drive. That would be my recommendations for equipment on this tank. So I think I've... oh, crew skills. Alright, don't pay too much attention to my crew skills. I made this crew when I was in the ELC and I was an idiot. So what would I actually recommend on this for crew skills? Well, you only have 3 crew. Commander, don't take Mentor, waste of time. Take Sixth Sense. Gunner, Driver, well, you could make a series of different cases for these guys. Your safest option is probably camo on both of them. That'd be my best bet. Is that everything I wanted to say? Oh, quickly, consumables. Well, I've got your standard set of consumables, you can go with that. You could mount some coffee on this if you wanted to, just to try and make it that bit better all round. In fact, that's quite a lot better all round. You could of course go with the large kits. Automatic fire extinguisher I don't think is necessary. You could take some gasoline just to make it a bit faster. I haven't noticed this thing really catch fire, so you could probably do away with the manual fire extinguisher. I think you need the other 2 pieces of kit though, personally. Anyway, enough of my prattling. I'm going to show you some games. I'm not showing you the armor scheme on this thing because it seems like a complete waste of time. The armor's garbage. But we'll just have a look at some gameplay and then we'll just wrap this video up. This is game number 1, and this is going to be very much about being the scout. Now, I would like to say light tank does not necessarily equal scout, and I would actually argue that of all the tier 6 light tanks, the AMX 12t is kind of the least scouty of the whole lot of them, but you can of course still do it. And if you are in a tier 9 game, which is the worst matchmaking this tank sees, then there's a very good chance you're going to have to do just that. So, the AMX 12t is kind of sluggish, which makes it poorly suited for active scouting, because it's just not fast or agile really enough to ninja out of the way of everybody's incoming fire. So instead, if you're going to scout with this thing, you kind of want to be a passive scout. And you can see that I have binoculars. It's my standard set of grinding equipment, but in this situation, as in many situations to be honest, binoculars are very helpful. So, spotted out a Jagdtiger 88. And you can see shots are landing already, and there's a Tiger 2. Now, I don't have Sixth Sense on this crew, but nonetheless, you know, I'm basically relying on knowing when I'm spotted, when people's guns start turning toward me. But, nonetheless, we're spotting all these guys, and hopefully our team's going to put some hurt on him. Now, hurt on them. The problem with doing this, and this is a problem faced by many scouts, is that it encourages your team to sit at the back and just shoot, which can backfire, because it means that if your team members are not experienced or skilled enough, then they will take shots rather than reaching the important positions that they should be getting into. Now that's understandable because you are lighting targets up, but if there is a location that you think you should be in your tank, you are better off going to the location than just shooting people. So I am still lighting targets up here. I am not firing, because if I fire, there's a pretty darn good chance I'm going to give my position away. Hopefully, the fact that there is a T-29 behind me, at least from the perspective of this Tiger 2, does not mean the Tiger 2 is going to shoot the T-29 and hit me by accident. That would be bad. Someone can't spell report. So far, I was about to say there haven't been any kills, but the enemy artillery nails RIS-6. And both sides have lost some health. And I'm still not firing. I'm just, you know, sitting here with my binoculars. So we've lost RIS-6, T-25/2 and a Black Prince. Now, none of these tanks are top tier, but even so, it'd be quite nice if we didn't lose these guys. We have killed an IS-8, which is a top tier tank, but we just lost an IS-3, and this is looking a little bit dubious. Now in this situation, you can start making arguments as to what I should or should not have done. Maybe I should at this point have turned tail, gone around the other side, and tried to flank around and take out their artillery. Instead, I have a shot on that Tiger 2 to try and help these guys along. Hope that I haven't been spotted, and in a minute I'm just going to run away. Because the scoreline is 1-6, this team is folding. It's just folding. There are too many people sitting at ENF 0, and maybe that's actually partly my fault. Because I was scouting, because I was spotting. And you can see I get a bit irritated in chat there, but there we go. Such things happen. Maybe they did suck, or maybe they just had an off day, whatever. It doesn't matter. Presumably I wasn't spotted because no one's actually shot me yet. PZSFL. And I'm going to have to abandon ship soon. Side armour of the VK. The front armour of the VK may be as thick as Fort Knox, but the side armour most definitely is not. Okay, time for me to be somewhere else. A shot just landed nearby, but I don't move. I think I was under the impression that I was being blind fired. No, I just took a shot from the other side. Screw this, I'm going somewhere else. Tiger P's out there, but I cannot sit up there and just trade fire with that dude. I need to move. Tiger P takes a buttload of damage. There's a Jag Panther up there as well, and a 59-16, so I've reloaded my clip. And we're going to go hunting, I think. Tiger P is down. Now, it's very unlikely that that I'm going to be able to pull this game back. This game is almost certainly a loss, but I can at least try and do some damage before we lose. There's myself, T29, artillery, and a T95 left. Coming up behind this Jagdpanther, he appears to be focused on someone else. Oh, our artillery. He's focusing on our artillery rather than the auto-loading light tank who is behind him. I missed my first shot, but there's more where that came from. Second penetrates, he nails the artillery, but third penetrates, and fourth seals the deal. You can see this thing's a little bit sluggish. Its top speed isn't terrible, but it's just so ponderous. And I'm reloading my magazine here, so I can't currently shoot. Oh, we just lost. Oh dear, 59-16. I have a shot, but this thing shooting on the move is not very good. 59-16, what gun's he using? Yeah, he's using auto-loading 76mm, which has garbage penetration, but more than enough for little old me. You will not be surprised to learn that that was a defeat. You might be surprised to learn that we got the top experience on our team. We managed to pick up 1 kill, do something like 700-800 damage, which is still more damage than we have health in a tier 6 light tank in a tier 9 game, and we did over 3,000 spotting damage. So there we go. What are you going to do? It was a defeat. Now let's have a look at a slightly different game with a slightly more uplifting ending. Here is game number 2, which has slightly more generous matchmaking. Still not the best matchmaking you can see in this tank. You can get into tier 7 games, not tier 6 because it gets scout matchmaking. But this is a tier 8 game, which is alright. It's not horrific, I guess. This is going to be a different kind of game. It's much less about the AMX 12t as a dedicated scout, and more about it as an all-round light harassment, skirmish, damage dealing machine. Again, I'm not showing you a groundbreaking replay that's going to knock your socks off. It's just a fairly respectable game that gives you an idea of, you know, the sort of thing this tank's capable of. Almost loaded our clip, and we are going to go down to this little hillock region. I should have, of course, mentioned that this is the patch 9.2 El Haluf. So there's an AMX 5100, there's a medium tank down here with me. AMX takes a load of damage to the face, the medium tank's a Comet. There's also a T-34-2 on the enemy team. AMX takes even more damage. And we've also got a T-43. If the AMX comes around the corner, I'm going to unload this 75mm gun into him. But it doesn't look like he really wants to do that, which is understandable. Trying to see if I can get some shots on this T-34, but it's not really working. And that is the limit of this gun's elevation to the side. The depression and elevation on this are so bad. Right, hull of the tank, I can definitely penetrate. There's 1 shell, 2. Third one is useless. My gunner is down. Set the guy on fire and kill him. Now I took 1 shot in return. He's using the 100mm gun, thankfully. But for that 1 shot, I managed to take out that tier 8 medium tank, and we are currently winning 3 kills to 1. So my clip's almost reloaded. Going around the other side of this hillock to see if anybody's going to be spotted that I can put shots into the side or rear of. Well, the enemy team has pulled it back to 3 kills apiece, however, which is a little bit suboptimal, but there we go. And gonna go with this T-43. He's asking for help, I'm going, yep. VK3001P up on that ridge. Ooh, that stung. There's also a Cromwell up there. And there's a light tank who's gone around to basically where I was. E25, aim, aim, aim. The aim time on this gun is not great. I fire, but a Jagdpanther 2 just ammo racks him before my shell lands, and I actually reload my magazine, which is probably a mistake. because I had 5 shells left, and they're 5 shells that I could have put to work on this AMX 12t. Now, the reload time on this clip is something of the order of 20 seconds. Yep, if I'd had a shot, I could have killed that 12t. So that was a bad... I killed the 12t anyway, never mind, ignore me. But 5 shells in the magazine. The AMX was already moving and lit up on the map when I hit the reload key, so I really shouldn't have done that. That was a mistake. But nonetheless, in that situation, it worked out okay. And that was my second kill. It was a kill secure, sure, but screw it. Kill's a kill. T43 saying, follow me. And I'm like, yeah, right. Or maybe not. No, you can go and take on the Cromwell and I'll come up behind him or something. We are winning 6 kills to 5. And I get in this bush and turn on my binocular telescopes. Now, Cromwell versus T43. Should be in the T43's favour, but the Cromwell is on full health and the T43 is not. Now, Cromwell appears to be coming around the corner for magical reasons, takes a big old chunk of damage to the face. So let's just make sure this guy dies. He takes pain. T43 is taking fire from his flank. I might take a shot or two doing this, but I've polished off the Cromwell. Kill number 3. Now, T150 has been spotted out there in the open. Oh, good lord, he had a shot at me. So I decided to hide behind something for a while because I do not want to get shot, and I'm reloading my magazine anyway. We're winning 8 kills to 5. Magazine reloaded. Come around here and see what I can do. We're winning 10 kills to 6. And this is not as if this tank is slow, but it is a little bit sluggish to accelerate. And when you compare it to the other tier 6 light tanks, it certainly doesn't feel especially quick. But screw this. So we are going to move underneath their ridge here. There's a VK3001P who just popped his clogs. I know there's the T150 down there somewhere. And the other 3 guys are all up on the map. So I just need to go over to the other side of the map. Now, in this sort of situation, your gun depression and your gun elevation can both let you down. There's the rear of a Jagdtiger, or the side of a Jagdtiger 88. So I let the gun aiming. There we go. This gun is not particularly good at range, but, you know, you can get some results with it. There's a second shot into him. And no. T150. Now, he's facing me, but I've got the rear of his turret, which is where that shot goes. He's tracked. Second one misses. And third one goes in. Now, if I was closer, I'd be able to actually use the full auto-loading clip potential of this gun to just unload on this guy, but I'm not, so I can't. I actually have to aim between my shots, and the aim time on this gun is not fantastic. So, aiming at the side of this guy's turret, almost reloaded the clip. Front of the tank, no, bounce. And there we go. We get the final kill of the match. Kill number 4 for us. Now that ended up being something like 1500 odd damage dealt, another 1500 odd damage, assistance damage that is, and all that was worth top XP on our team and a first class mastery, which wasn't too shabby. 4 kills certainly didn't hurt. So, have a look at the post-battle results, and then we'll nip back to the garage. So, what do I think about this machine? A lot of people don't like this tank. It's a bit of a departure from the ELC, which is a huge amount of fun. It's like going from the Cromwell to the Comet on the British medium line. It loses the speed, the manoeuvrability, all that good stuff, or it loses some of it. But does that mean that the tank that comes after it is necessarily a bad tank? I don't think so. I think this is actually quite a fun little machine. As you can see, I've actually got a Mark of Excellence on this, and I was mainly playing this for daily doubles, so I got the Mark of Excellence without really trying. It was fairly easy. And if you look at things like the WN8 scores that you get for games, for those that don't know, WN8 is just a number to try and measure your effectiveness in a game. It's, in my opinion, a little bit arbitrary, but whatever. If you look at the WN8 scores, they are set per tank. So you can see how you're doing relative to other people who are driving the same machine. And the WN8 scores I was getting in some games were stupid, considering what I'd actually done in the game. If you look at where the different mastery badge levels are set, they're really low. I mean, I've got an Ace Tanker game in this machine coming up a bit later, and it's not that much XP. It's just over 1,000, maybe 1,100, I can't remember, but it's not that much XP. So people don't seem to do very well in this tank, but I don't think it's half bad. I think you do have to bear in mind that it's sluggish and that it is not a scout. It can scout, but it is not a scout. You need to bear in mind the limited ammo capacity, and so you need to take your shots with care. This is not the sort of tank where you can just drive around and spam ammunition everywhere and you'll be okay. You won't be. You need to place your shots with care. And you need to... It's not a very forgiving tank to play, because you need to take advantage of opportunities that turn up in order to do damage. But you don't really have the raw speed to get out of trouble if that opportunity turns very sour very quickly. And so you do actually have to be a little bit careful when playing this tank, and I wouldn't necessarily say it's an easy tank to play, and it's not actually a tank I was looking forward to after I heard people bemoan it, but I've actually had a lot of fun in it. How does it compare to the other tier 6 light tanks? Well, just to compare it to the ones I can think of, well, the MT-25, the Russian, is completely different, because the MT-25, the gun is a bit meh, the focus is all on raw speed. This is a pure scout, pure active scout, driving around like a maniac. The T-21 is a light tank, obviously. It is sort of a scout, but with the good gun depression and a pretty decent gun, it kind of also plays a bit like a support tank. You can do some respectable amounts of damage in this. Again, it's not a very popular machine. I'm not really sure why. I don't currently own any of the others. What are the other tier 6 light tanks? Oh, I do own some of the others, but, you know, whether I've played them or not, because you can see the T-37 right there. I haven't played the T-37 very much. I think I've had 2 games in it, so I'm not going to compare it to this, because I don't feel I'm in a position to really make an intelligent comparison. Who else gets a tier 6 light tank? The Germans, the VK2801. Which one you prefer will probably be a matter of preference. The VK is faster, better armoured, has a derpier gun. I mean, it's a howitzer. And I think is more forgiving to play. I actually had more fun driving the French machine. Go figure. Then you've got the Chinese tier 6 light tank, the 5916, which gives you a choice between either the same 57mm gun you get on the MT-25 or an autoloader with very low penetration. Yeah, in my opinion, if you want to play a scout, go and play a different tank. In fact, if you want to play a scout, don't necessarily play up this French line at all. These tanks are not really scouts. These tanks are light assault tanks. They are opportunistic, potentially very lethal damage dealers. That's what they are. If an AMX whatever light tank gets behind you in your heavy tank while you're fighting off someone, boom, that's, well, even from this, it's like 800 damage into your rear. And then it drives away cackling. So the defining feature about this tank is the autoloader. And that's the good thing about it. Now, I really want to make a comparison at some point with the T-37, the new American Tier 6 light tank, because that also has the option to mount an autoloader, and I know the 5916 gets an autoloader, but that autoloader, in my opinion, kind of sucks. So, yeah, I mean, the autoloader is why you play this tank, and use it, basically. Be careful, be opportunistic, spot when you can, but just bear in mind you are not a fast, active scout. So I guess the question, am I keeping this tank? No. Why? Well, the reasons are fairly simple. One, the really low ammo capacity. That means that if your team completely sucks, then perhaps more than most other light tanks even, you do not have the ability to carry the game. Now, you could say this about most light tanks. They are quite reliant on their team, but with the low ammo capacity on this tank, there is a very, very, very real chance you will just run out of ammunition and no longer be able to shoot anyone, which is bad if your team sucks. So you're very limited in that sense on how much you can actually do, which is a theme throughout the rest of this tank line, or most of it as far as I can see. And just because I was doing well in this tank relative to other people, that doesn't necessarily mean that I was having the best impact on the game. I mean, if we look at my stats in this tank very briefly. Where are we? Doobie-doo, tier 6, tier 6, tier 6, AMX 12t. I have a 52% win rate, which is alright. Played 73 games, survived about a third of my games, 75% hit rate. I deal out more damage on average than I take, and more than one destruction ratio. Okay, cool. Yeah. The stats aren't actually too shabby. Not too shabby at all. But I don't know, I don't think I'm keeping it. I think I will sell this, take the crew, and shove them into the AMX 1375, which slightly dubiously appears to use the same gun, but never mind, there we go. But what I really want you to take away from this, two things. One, this is not a dedicated scout tank, whatever anybody tells you. It can scout, but that does not mean it is a scout. And two, this tank is not as bad as a lot of people say it is. As I say, I had people telling me this was an awful tank, and I beg to differ. I don't think it's the best tank in the world, and I think possibly, although I haven't really looked at it yet, it might possibly have now been outclassed by the T-37, but I don't want to pass judgment because I haven't played it much yet, and I certainly haven't played it with the autoloader. But this is not a bad tank. Yeah, just get used to its limitations, get used to what it can and can't do, and play it, go and have fun. It's a good little machine. Well, it's certainly not a bad little machine, and I had fun in it. So this is a positive review, even if I'm not keeping the tank. Anyway, I hope you guys enjoyed that review. If you did, please feel free to catch some of my other videos and or subscribe to my channel, and I wish you very happy hunting on that battlefield. Ciao, ciao.